These invisible forces seemingly still exist out there, and we can't categorize what they may be. And isn't that just like a really awesome way to look at the world too?
Today we're talking to one of our favorite guests and one of my favorite friends, podcaster Jim Perry, the host of Euphomet, a paranormal documentary series that explores the unknown and our relationship to it by talking with those who believe they've experienced the supernatural. But the mission of Jim's work has very little to do with what is real and far more to do with what the paranormal means to us on an emotional level. In this episode, we'll talk about Jim's work with haunted objects, our ideas about how the potential paranormal expresses itself to different people and different generations, and share some haunted experiences of our own that have made it all but impossible for us to live a purely skeptical life. I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. Hello, Jim Perry. How are you doing today? Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's cold outside now, but I am warm inside being here chatting with you. Chelsey, this is great.
That's so nice, Jim. Thank you. I'm very, very hot in the closet that I'm recording in, so sometimes I'll have to open the door a little bit and just kind of like fan some air in like I'm doing right now.
Sure. Yeah.
So, Jim, for those of you who haven't heard Jim on our show before, Jim is the host of Euphomet, which is a paranormal podcast that deals with the human side of the paranormal versus whether or not certain paranormal experiences are quote unquote real, because none of us really care about that here, at least. So, yeah, we worked together at the very beginning of American Hysteria, and right before that I worked with Jim on Euphomet. We went on a couple adventures together.
We did, and they're still adventures that I quote all the time. In fact, some of those are the first ones that I tell people when I'm trying to describe what I do for the show. For whatever reason, it's like hardwired into me that I go directly to those ones that we did together. And
that's wonderful.
Notable.
We had a very good time. I mean, at one point we were eating expensive Italian food with a Bigfoot hunter who had just taught us all about the secret signs that Bigfoot leaves with sticks. And
in the middle of a wilderness that we had no idea where we were.
Yes, it was what we chose to do, and it was a beautiful thing. And he was listening to music really loud. We were speeding through the forest. It was beautiful. It was a really beautiful thing.
He had a beautiful voice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Kind man.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And a UFO lawyer.
I've kept in touch with Brian, by the way.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
That's so nice. How's he doing?
Very good. He had a little bit of a health scare earlier this year, but he kicked out of it. And they just had sort of a Squatcher summit of sorts, where a bunch of folks from his Facebook group, these individuals that believe they can communicate with Sasquatch through sigils and formations and symbols and stuff, they were all out in the woods camping together for a weekend, and I was invited. I unfortunately was not able to attend, but I was trying to make it happen. I was going to try and go and experience that out there again, and you may think I'm nuts, but
nope. It sounds great, and it honestly is so nice to hear that Brian has a nice community like that he can be camping with in the woods. He deserves it.
Yeah.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about haunted objects as a complement to our haunted doll episode that we did a couple weeks ago, and as like a one last push of Halloween. You know, it's like, okay, it's over, but I know you guys want just one more Halloween treat. So first of all, Jim, will you explain to us a little bit of your experience? Because you've experienced so many different things within the paranormal community, everything from alien abductees, which you talked about with us, to Bigfoot, to people who have entire museums of haunted objects. So
Yeah.
specifically when it comes to haunted objects, can you give us an overview of what your experiences have been like?
The experiences that I have had are very similar to what you've seen in horror movies, in which I will qualify that by explaining some situations, of course. But, listen, there are items that are out there that for whatever reason, people believe they have experiences with that are startling, that are jarring, that scare the shit out of them, that they can't rectify, that they have no explanation for. And I was just lucky enough to have found two individuals that have an entire museum of haunted objects. And most of these objects are ones not that they have carefully curated, but that have been handed off to them, have been left at their doorstep, have been, sort of thrust upon them by people that just need some relief and need to take this object somewhere. And they feel if they just leave it out in the middle of nowhere that, they're going to they're going to suffer the consequence of doing so. So that's how deep this gets with a lot of individuals that are out there. And we're talking about dolls, we're talking about paintings, we're talking about mirrors, all this sort of classical things that you would consider like, ooh, that could be creepy if somebody said it were haunted. Yeah, well, those are the things in real life that people have those relationships to. And we can wax poetic maybe about what that means, right? That like popular culture and what's happening in real life mirror each other so closely. And what's the deal with that? But, so I've had an experience to engage with haunted objects directly. And on one occasion, I went to these individuals that own the Paranormal Museum, and they showed me an item that was given to them by someone that was in distress, that needed to find a new home for this Nikisi doll. And this Nikisi doll is sort of an African ritualistic statue. It is, how shamans and medicine workers of tribes essentially guided themselves or helped guide them through spiritual practice. These were guards, they were helpers, and they built a personal relationship with these sages, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have this statue up on a shrine, and at its feet are coins, candy, tobacco, basically offerings that people have left for this statue while they've had it on tour or when people have visited, because essentially it had grown a big relationship with those people who had experienced it and became a big part of their lives. So I said, you know what? What if I tried to interview this statue? Is that okay? And just thinking like, it has such a close relationship to people. It's communicated over sort of ghost hunting devices in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, let's give it a shot. Is that respectful? Is that okay? And they said, yeah, like definitely let's try it. And I gave the statue an offering. The statue's name was Billy. I gave it an offering. And we put out this little recording device that it only records when there is a frequency of sound coming through it that it can receive. It doesn't record anything else. If there's a silent room, it doesn't record the room noise. It only records if there's spoken, audible tones that it can interpret and pick up. So I'm recording on my device as well. And I start asking this statue questions. And they're very basic questions. How do you like where you live? What is your opinion of the cat? Things like this, like, what do you think of your surroundings? And you can see from the recording device whether it's picking up sound or not by a light that will flash or not. And when the light is flashing, it means that it is actually picking up a signal and it's recording something. So I go through a series of about 8 questions. The light never turned on. And we pick up the recorder and we play it, and there's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, well, maybe he was just shy and maybe he didn't want to talk. And then the owner of the statue, or I suppose the keeper or the the host of the statue, says, wait a minute, just give me a second. Let's try it again. And Greg is his name, Greg Newkirk. He leans over and he whispers in the statue's ear something. And he puts the recorder back down. And I say, okay, let's try this again. So I continue to ask it several more questions. By the first question that I get out, though, that red light is shining on the device.
Oh my God.
And the anticipation, obviously, in me, suspecting that I'm not going to hear anything. Like, I am open-minded about all of this. I try to go in with an open heart too, but I don't know what I believe in, Chelsey. And like, I'm a very, sort of logical, grounded person, I think.
You are.
That light gave me all sort of jitters because I was like, oh shit, okay, well, I got to really ask some good questions here because this thing could be responding to me. So I get a little personal. I asked them, like, what do you think about Greg and Dana, the hosts?
Ooh,
and
drama.
Yeah, and I say, so I get a little personal. I ask a few more questions, and we play the recording back. And after every single question, there is some sort of audible sound and some sort of audible message back to me. And I included that in a Euphomet episode. People can hear responses, and that gave me such a chill down my spine, but also was so heartwarming because the questions and responses were very emotional. It made the hosts sort of emotional in that moment too, because the statue was saying evidently very warm things about them. Like, it felt protected, it felt safe, it felt bonded to them. And whatever was going on in that room, the feeling, the energy in that room, it was like palpable because you saw a relationship there. You saw a connection. And the more I thought about it, there are other parts of the world. There are other belief systems out there. Very prominent in Japanese culture, actually. There's a certain belief system in Japan where everything has a spirit. The toy that the child plays with for a few weeks that has a spirit contains a connection, and we can share in that connection. And yeah, it was a little emotional and a lot scary at the same time.
I remember that episode for sure. And do I remember from this episode a scream?
Yes.
The object screamed at some point, right? Because it's still, like, I can still feel the reaction I had to the sounds.
Yeah.
You're not someone who is, I believe, making a forgery for fun, or there's no trick of the mirror here. Yeah. So I know you so well, and I know that's not what you're in the business of, because it doesn't really change the story of what you do. It's not important to what you do, so it's not something that would make sense for you to fake, because it'd probably be obvious. But yeah.
That's a great way to qualify it. Like, whether anything pops off or not, it doesn't fucking matter to me, really.
Yeah.
It's only when it does, then it's like, oh, okay, well, this is a part of the story now.
And then you have to question all of the things that because again, for our audiences, you're a flexible skeptic, which is what I call myself. You're not, you want to believe in a way, but that isn't like with a confirmation bias.
That's right.
You would be intrigued to know if there were paranormal forces, but that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for the way that the paranormal expresses itself in the emotional.
That's right. And, for as much as I have experience that I can't explain while doing this show, some paranormal enthusiasts would question, like, how are you still so, reasonably skeptical about this shit with how much you've seen, Mm-hmm. But I can't, I'm not here to evangelize anything. You know what I mean? And so often that's the case within the spectrum of belief that exists within the paranormal. It's very weighted into, okay, well, you believe in everything or you don't, believe in anything. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that is like really a way to go about these things, because there are so many complex factors and nobody knows the answer to any of this. So it behooves you to like just be open to these experiences without, I don't know, getting lost in that quagmire of belief systems that, I don't know, like, sometimes I feel like culturally we're supposed to either believe or not, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's like also the antithesis of something like, like the Socratic idea of the only thing you can know is that you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that can be true, is that there is no truth, like that type of that. And I think we both subscribe to that. And the last thing I would ever want to be is some sort of ultimate arbiter of truth. That's why even in the Haunted Dolls, episode was like, I'm not going to tell you that haunted dolls aren't real. Why would I do that? What? Do I know that haunted dolls aren't real? Of course I don't. Like, there's a lot of good evidence to say that people like maybe Ed and Lorraine Warren had something to gain from saying such dolls were haunted.
Right.
But, even that's up for debate, I guess.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about them in a little bit, too.
Sure.
Actually, you know what? Why don't we talk about them right now?
Sure.
Because they were a big part of our episode, because we did, we had to have our Annabelle section. And I have a hard time understanding exactly what's up with Ed and Lorraine Warren, because we can't say that ghost hunting doesn't owe them a debt of gratitude, quote unquote. I also have heard that they were sincere, and I've heard that they were total charlatans. And I'm curious, because I'm not an expert in Ed and Lorraine, They pop up in the Satanic Panic constantly, but it's not something where I feel that I have a full grasp on who they are. Do you have a better grasp on who they are?
Probably not. Although I think I probably have a perspective on them.
Okay.
I think that, and this is just total conjecture and my opinion based off of experiencing similar things. I think when some people have been granted a certain level of celebrity or notoriety, they will do what they need to retain that. Mm-hmm. Even if it is, compromising what would otherwise be a stellar reputation or a quality of work or being honest.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of these occasions we're seeing, maybe even, I don't know, maybe they were good people. I'm not sure. I didn't know them. There was a lot of different stories out there about even their personal life that was maybe a little messy, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some messy stuff
about
their personal life. And you all can go out and look that up for yourselves if you want to.
That's right.
We're not going to take away from haunted dolls.
Yeah. Right. I mean, a lot of it, I think both of those things that you said could be true about them in terms of, were they a huge influence and very important to the ghost hunting community and ghost investigations and the template for so much of what was to come, whether that was written material or filmed material, or basically just creating content, create a product around this pursuit, then absolutely, right? Was everything 100% legitimate? Not so sure,
I think we can say we are sure.
Yeah.
That is one thing we can be sure about, is that everything was not 100% legitimate. More after this. And now, back to the show.
So there you go. I think with those guys, a bunch of things can be true at the same time for them, and they're complex individuals that I have personally, I guess, not really looked too deep into their well of work and their stories, just because of the things that anecdotally I've heard. And I think no matter what, our approaches are very different, and our intent and what we're looking for in this space is very different. So they're not even really influences on me.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about the template that they created, and I think that that's the most important part of them, is the legacy, not of their work necessarily, but of what they made ghost hunting about. And that was very much a Catholic framework. And so all of the ghosts or whatever, all of the paranormal experiences they were having were demons, right? They were satanic. And from that, it seems that most of the horror movies, in fact, that we watch, Amityville especially, which they were, directly paid for, it is about the satanic cult, or it's about the pentagram in the basement, or it's about
Yeah.
those types of things. And so I am going to make the assumption, Jim, that you do not believe that haunted objects are full of Christian demons. And I assume that a lot of the folks that you speak to also don't look at haunted objects or things that might contain a paranormal force as being demonic in the sense of a Christian framework. So what are some other ideas that you and the people you've interviewed have about what these objects are actually containing?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. There's a lot of different sort of angles to go on that. And I mean, it's a huge discussion, but I will say I have actually spoke with people on Night Drift, for example, that do believe they're demonic spirits. And of course, on that show, I'm profiling a little bit more wide spectrum of ideas just so people know that there are more ideas about this stuff than sort of just my own or my friends. But yeah, I would... what is this stuff? What are these energies or spirits or entities that are residing within these dolls, right? There is this idea of non-human intelligence and ultra-terrestrials. And this idea was populated by an author, John Keel. And others had sort of rapped about very similar things, but it's this idea that there have been sort of these non-human intelligences that operate off of a different frequency than what we can really interpret, but that have always been here, and that they use different tools to give us information or to be present within our lives. So that could, potentially take form as a light in the sky. It could take form as a ghost or a cryptid, and it could take form as some sort of energy within an object. And universally, this energy or these entities, we're not sure of sort of what any sort of agenda they may have. We're not sure what their intent is necessarily, but it is definitely a thought that is out there by those that, more closely associate what their work to like sort of Forteanism, like Charles Fort. So there's an idea that out there that could be it. But, there's also this idea that instead of, sort of demonic creatures, that there are sort of spirits, that maybe we're not going to heaven per se as an afterlife, but that some form of life after death does exist, and that there are various forms that may take. There are a lot of sort of mystical practices that also have different ideas about what these places could be, the aether, etc. And sometimes they believe that we are visited from these places by relatives, and sometimes even our past or future selves are attempting to communicate with us, in these various ways. And so once you start thinking about things in those terms as well, and you're having an experience with some sort of object, it gets just even more confusing and a little more alarming for me, actually, when not thinking about just like, oh my God, this is a Pazuzu or something. And you're thinking like, is this future me telling me something here?
I don't want to meet past or future me. I'm plenty. But yeah, and I think, we were talking before the interview started about the expression of the paranormal depending upon whatever is happening in the world at that time. And I think what you're saying is, I again have no idea what I believe, but that is so much closer to something that could potentially make sense to me, is that we have no idea what these entities or what this energy is or what, these spirits are, whatever. But what I think we can see very clearly is how the paranormal is expressing itself and bouncing itself off of psychically the events that are happening in the world, whether they be war or, changes in power or pop cultural developments. We see UFOs take on a different form based on reports telling us what they look like, then maybe we do see something, but we're able only to sort of see it through ourselves and through our own eyes and experience and anxieties. I don't know. That rings more true to me. And it does not necessarily negate that there is a paranormal, but it takes the paranormal with the understanding that it's still projected through our human experience and the things that we understand and can already comprehend.
Yeah, right. And listen, it also places it in a place where, sort of science can be considered alongside it. That there are potentially things that we haven't discovered yet that maybe sometime we will. Look at the history of discoveries that have happened about the world that we live in, or at least how we think we can interpret or understand the world we live in. Think about barometric pressure. I mean, there was a time where we didn't understand what sort of air pressure was. Right? Until we were able to figure out that, you mix mercury with water, you create a barometer or whatever. And now we can have some sort of scale for this invisible force, seemingly. These invisible forces seemingly still exist out there, and we can't catalog or categorize what they may be or what they're influenced by. And isn't that just a really awesome way to look at the world too?
Yeah.
And to look at reality in that, yeah, we're players in this game, right? But there's a lot of other stuff happening around us that we can be curious about, that we can engage with. And I think that creates a more, I don't know, sort of a curious, informed public when they know that we don't have all the answers and that there's still answers that we can go out there and find or look for or explore. That's awesome.
Yeah, and they can break the mold that has been created by people like the Warrens or pop culture or movies. It's like the paranormal gets to be so much more personal than the culture makes it, because it's like, okay, you have a ghost, it's a dead person. You have an alien, it's a visitor spying on Earth. You have you have any number of paranormal experiences that start to be really cookie cutter. Like when you watch those paranormal shows, it's sort of kind of the same story, but at the same time, there are so many stories, especially that you gather, that feel completely original in a way and aren't completely based in what we already have to grab from.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for that. And I mean, I agree that, listen, it's a whole other conversation to start talking about the paranormal in television. Now it's displayed, but they are on a very, very thin spectrum of what all of this stuff could be and what the investigators, like serious investigators and, thought leaders and thinkers that have explored this topic for a long time, what those conversations have been. I mean, it's amazing to me that other things haven't been considered. I mean, I know one of you and I's favorite books is Carl Jung's book about flying saucers. And listen, you don't hear that material necessarily discussed intellectually through these conversations about what UAP are and when they're going to release the new. Don't even get me started on that shit either.
I wouldn't dare.
I'm sick of it. But that's a good example of individuals that are waiting for the status quo to be confirmed for them. Mm-hmm. If you really think about it, they want the government, who they don't trust anyway, they want the government to give them answers about something they already feel they have the answers to.
Right. Which
is extraterrestrials are flying in craft that defy physics, and that's what this is. But we don't know that.
Right.
And the government isn't going to give us any other information than the tomes of research that have been scientifically done over decades by independent researchers and investigators. So it's very strange that we're waiting for our reality to be confirmed in some way based off of those stereotypes and tropes. And it goes right back to what you're saying about expectations per things being haunted by demons, that every haunted object, is potentially nefarious and tied to some sort of satanic cabal. It's all sort of confirmation bias on securing our ideas of what can be real and what isn't real, And in some way that makes people feel safe in the mystery of it all, I think.
Yeah, and it makes people feel safe, and it also speaks to our strong confirmation bias, because if we ask the government to release the records, we're never going to trust the records. We're still going to trust our own experiences and research, and it's not going to necessarily change based on anything rational, because these things aren't living in the rational world as we know it.
Yeah.
And so I think that I think that proof is such an interesting thing when it comes to the paranormal, because by default it can't be proven, right? So it's just and I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but it does feel Well,
listen, I think you're bringing up a great point here, because I think it's one of the reasons this is going to be controversial. And so I finished my matcha, and so I'm all real jazzed up now.
He's here.
This is going to be a little controversial, but I do blame some paranormal culture for inspiring the conspiracy bullshit that we have to live through today with COVID deniers and such.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at a faction of people and entertainers that for decades peddled this idea of a secret conspiracy against people, largely based off of like knowledge of extraterrestrials, Area 51, all these different things that were so fun to talk about and think about, and, you know, in particular in the 90s or whatever. That was the same culture that helped birth these same ideas of do your own research, right? Like the do your own research people about the vaccines and shit.
Yeah.
And it's terrible because it weaponized what I think was fun curiosity around things that weren't hurting people. And just took that template and that blueprint, and we're like, actually, we're gonna use that in this way, and this is how you spin this out of control. And it's terrible, but I think it's kind of proof of that confirmation bias that we live through.
And it's just the same with the satanic sort of demonic presences, the unseen forces battling it out, you know, for your soul. That, you know, it shouldn't be surprising that all of that pop cultural onslaught of like the paranormal is satanic, the paranormal is demonic, and even people who aren't Christian will often say this is demonic. It's a demonic thing. I don't know what that means, but it's a demonic thing. You know, back in my day, I've never been a Christian, but when I thought about things that I was afraid of, you know, I was like, it felt like it came from the dark world of some kind, you know, and I felt like, for lack of a better word, it was something evil, you know, or something, some residual evil from something terrible that somebody did while they were living, or, you know, any number of ideas like that. So I think it shouldn't be surprising to us that now we have the paranormal mixing so seamlessly with the conspiratorial uprising we've had, which also was happening in the 90s, by the way, and was utilizing the paranormal. So it's not a new relationship, but it's not a relationship that was when we were growing up so strong. Like I never questioned. I was a ghost hunter in high school. I went to ghost hunting conferences, and I job shadowed ghost hunters. And
I love that so much about you.
I know. It was the coolest project in class. But
you were so cool though.
Oh yeah. I liked to be alone, do my ghost hunting. But there was never a time really where I was thinking, oh, this is demonic, or this is connected to something Christian, or whatever you want to say. I had my own ideas about it, but I did really, really, really believe in ghosts. And I mean, I still believe in ghosts, if we're being real, because I've just had so many ghost experiences. And maybe that's just the old brain wanting to fuck with me a little. And that's fine too, because it's still fun. Ghosts, come at me. I love you.
Oh, geez. Now you've done it.
Now I've done it. They know. They already know me. It's fine.
Do you live in is your house haunted at all?
You know, I'm glad you asked me that, Jim, because I was going to force you to listen anyway, and now I can have been asked, which is always better. So before we got our cats, I feel that the house was haunted, and now we can just be like, no, it was the cats. They're, you know, rolling around or doing something. But before then, this is not explained by any animal presence. We had been hearing a lot of like weird sounds and things we couldn't really explain. And at one point, I got to a moment where my partner Miranda was gone and I was home alone and I heard something in the wall. You know, like something like a little bit of a scratching, but not like, it didn't sound like a mouse necessarily. So I went and I got, you know, which is one of my favorite things in the world to do, is get a glass and listen through a wall, especially if I'm listening to some kind of drama on the other side of a wall.
Real
fantastic. But when you're listening for something paranormal, it can be very, very, very scary. So I popped the glass on the wall, started listening. Couldn't really hear much. Kind of stopped when I started listening, right? And then I'm standing looking at the door to my office. So I'm kind of on a kitty corner wall. And then I turn my head to kind of like be like, okay, well, I'm done with this. I'm not hearing anything. And right when I turn, I feel something go right in my face. Gosh. And I heard it. I fucking heard it. And I reeled backwards in the room. Like I just reeled backwards. Okay. Scared me so much.
Yeah.
So then a few days later, first of all, I found a rat in our yard that had been disemboweled. So that was scary.
Oh, wow.
Probably a cat, but scary. And then the scariest thing that happened, which is when Miranda and I were like, okay, we're not believers in these things, but we like got some sage and we saged the house because we did not know what to do. That's my favorite
move, by the way. That's my favorite move when people are like, I don't believe in this shit, but I'm going to do
We're
this anyway.
saging this bitch. Yeah. Yeah. So we, and the reason being that I was in my office. I smelled what smelled like something burning, like a burning rubber. And I ran out. First, I ran to the kitchen because I assumed that like I left a burner on or something. And then that wasn't it. So I turned, and right by our front door on our side table, there was a tall flame.
Oh my God.
And it was like smoking. And I mean like a flame about, let's see, like 1.5 feet tall, a skinny
Holy
flame.
shit.
And I ran over there like, what the fuck? You know, and I like slammed my foot on it and put it out with my foot. And it was a lighter that I had left on the table that had self-immolated.
What?
And was on fire. And, you know, I looked it up online and it's like, you know, it's like the cheap, crappy one that's see-through, not a Bic. And
sure.
So they were like, yeah, those can sometimes do that, like if X, Y, and Z happens, but it's very, very rare, you know? And I was like, this ghost might be trying to kill me.
Oh my God.
And, you know, Miranda's mom came over and she also is somebody who can feel things and told us that she was feeling this particular spirit. Wasn't necessarily bad or anything like that. But, you know, after that, we were like, okay, this is enough evidence for us. And we saged it. And then we got some cats. Maybe the cats keep it at bay. I don't know. But that was my most recent brush with the paranormal. And not good. Not a good one. Demonic? Yeah. Sounds like it.
Yeah, definitely demons. 100% demon. No. Listen, you know, these events that we encounter definitely change our relationship with places, right?
Yeah.
And the spaces that we make home in, that we are to feel comfortable in. They do create like a little bit of an edge to these places that we live in, and a part of me thinks that, well, a part of me wonders why that is, and what the intention is behind that. You know, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
the lighter thing is crazy.
Ooh, yeah, yep. I'm not even making it up. I could, but
I'm glad nothing like burnt down.
I know, or like did some kind of damage to the house because I rent.
Oh
but yeah, it was completely shocking for sure. It shook us.
Well, getting the cats was a good call because there are folks that believe that, you know, cats can help control or monitor those situations because they're sort of mystical beings on their own. I mean, I think they could be. I mean, I think my cat, when it was a kitten, like could teleport. Like she would appear in one spot and then just be gone and outside. And no one let her outside.
Freaky.
And we just be like, what is happening here? And then I looked into like some lore. And of course, there's like this idea of familiars, right? Like a witch's familiar and all these different things. And cats had been used for that purpose for forever. You know, when I'm talking about like sort of that statue from way back at the first of the program and how it was used as a guide or a guard for shamanic practice. Well, cats were used that way forever. So some people feel that some cats are imbued with this mystical power still. And so, yeah, maybe they're protecting your house now and you just don't have to worry about. Now, if you start seeing them, you know, brandishing lighters, I'd be worried about that, but.
Well, it's weird too, because we found them outside our house at 5 weeks old, abandoned, just crying their little throats out. And I brought them inside. And so maybe they were sent, you know, by some other more benevolent force to protect us from the rat disemboweling, house burning down demons that was blowing in my face, right? Rude. Isn't that a rude thing? It was like, oh, I know how I'm just gonna like fuck with you. Just you know, it's just like, oh my God. It was crazy. More after this. And now back to the show.
It brings up a good point too, Chelsey. Like so many people have these experiences and they don't even want to talk about them because they're so spot on with what we've seen on movies and TV.
Yeah.
They're just like, no one's going to believe me that the ghost like made that sound that's on every horror movie ever.
Yeah.
You know, like, but that's how people interpret these things and that's how their experiences are, you know, from ghosts to Sasquatch to UFOs. It's something straight out of cinema. It's crazy.
And that brings, okay, so going back to sort of haunted dolls, when you mentioned other haunted objects earlier, you mentioned mirrors and you mentioned paintings. And I found that interesting because what it just suddenly triggered in my head was like, okay, so these are all objects that kind of represent humans, right? A haunted doll is nothing but, you know, a statue of a human. And that's been true in all cultures since the beginning of recorded time. And then mirrors, of course, which by the way, I have a serious fear of mirrors.
They're scary.
Yeah, they're very, very scary. And, you know, paintings, assuming that the painting is a portrait of a person, but regardless, it's sort of imbued with the person that makes it. And I think that there's got to be something to the fact that so many of the objects we find ourselves believing to be haunted are kind of replicas in some way of ourselves.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, you know, and how much of that is what we're sort of imbuing that with in searching for those patterns or giving life to those things that are, you know, at the time they were created, maybe the closest thing to staring at another human being, right?
Yeah.
And with the intentionality of people looking at things, building that relationship, is that building some sort of spirit on its own? And that's when you start getting into tulpas, you know, and people should look those up. You know, tulpamancy is really interesting because there's actually, I've been researching for the last couple years, not even couple years, I think probably 6 or 7 years now.
Will you explain to us what tulpamancy is?
Yes, okay. Yes. So for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been exploring this concept of tulpamancy, and that is a ritual process where with meditation and great intent and sometimes some sort of magical practice, individuals, you know, have the power to create spirit or to create an entity out of sheer will and belief. And this is a very, very ancient tradition and an ancient belief. It's very close to the, you know, Kabbalistic golem that some will know about. And that is, you know, creating life from just that spiritual intent. And so, you know, there is an idea that can be made, you know, many traditions around the world have this ancient belief and ritual that exist in some form today. And for the last 6 or 7 years, I've been watching this online community that exists for tulpamancers, for now, like a community of tulpamancers who are building essentially their best friends, their lovers, better versions of themselves together, all with this power of intent. And these things will sometimes be placed into an object. They'll sometimes be in their own head and become a second identity that they use. sometimes they'll be imbued into something digital. And so we're starting to see like AI be used to create like sort of digital topomancy.
Wow.
And it's done very quietly. This is not something in the open. They're very like sort of, you have to go pretty deep online to try and find them at this point in time. But they're out there, and it is a real thing based off these ancient traditions.
And do they work together? Like if someone were to say, I want to create this romantic partner for myself, would everybody work together to kind of will that at the same time? Is that what the community aspect is? Like, is it a ritual together?
Yeah, in some cases they'll perform rituals together. In other cases, it's an individualistic pursuit that they just basically share notes on.
Okay.
Like, hey, like this is how I did this, and like this is how this is going, and a journal of how that process is going through. And it is one of those things where one of the reasons I haven't sort of covered that story yet is because it's very that is a complicated thing to cover in a journalistic way, I think, and morally. Because, you're dealing with mental health situations with that as well, in addition to those that are, mentally healthy, I suppose. I don't know if I'm saying these things the right way, that are practicing it or are doing this as a part of their magical practice, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, a diversion, yet just to say that when you mention that like, the painting or the mirror, these things that for a long time, especially if they're historic, and most of these objects that are haunted are old, are vintage, right? They've had enough time for this idea of a human, of a spirit, of a presence to be like kind of really placed into it in a weird way. And so maybe that carries through with it. And I think that's a really interesting idea. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. And I mean, it brings me back to thinking about poltergeists and the story of what would you call like a malevolent entity that doesn't necessarily have a consciousness, but this ball of energy that creates some kind of destruction coming from classically the emotional turmoil of a young woman or a young girl. And I think that's a trope, right? It's also something that was an experience of my own when I was in high school. And I had a lot of ghost experiences. And looking back, it feels like there was an element of my emotionality and my own struggles that I was going through kind of projected out. And, things of mine would go missing. They'd end up in weird places. They'd be missing for months at a time and then end up on my bedside table. I'd wake up, my cell phone was thrown across the room. I was actually touched by a ghost at one point, like hit on the forehead really hard, like just like 3 times, like tap, tap, tap as I'm laying in my bed, just like stuff that really is still in my body, right? These things. And I would never say that was a ghost. I would never say I created a poltergeist, but I don't know how to explain those things. And it's just interesting, right, that there is this lore that already exists that perhaps I was aware of, perhaps I wasn't. But I think it's part of, why I was so interested in ghosts at that time was it was happening. And it was confusing me. And, both my parents have always believed in ghosts very strongly. So, I had a template there for that to express itself in a certain way. But yeah, it is something that is potentially a psychological projection. And that's just as interesting as the paranormal in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, imagine if we found we all had the ability to psychologically project these seemingly separate entities from us.
Yeah. And they could affect the world without our own touch.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's
and maybe
amazing.
That's what the internet is. You just type a comment, send it out there, and like it ruins somebody's whole week. Yeah.
We recreated an ability that has laid docile in us for millennia, is what we did. It's the internet.
Oh, yes. An ancient ritual of sacrifice.
The weird thing about computers, though, now is that when we talk about mirrors, right?
Yeah.
And how creepy those are, one of the haunted objects that were in the possession of these curators of that haunted museum was a black mirror. And these obsidian mirrors have been used in magic for forever as a channeling device, as a divination device. Basically, magicians and witches would, sit with a soft gaze towards this obsidian mirror until basically things started to take shape in this mirror around them. It would almost open a different portal. And what's strange about this is that in the modern world, I'm looking at a 24-inch Apple monitor right now.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at myself in it. It's not on right now. And I just have a fucking black mirror staring at me all day long. And I'm not even conscious of that. And we have our laptops open. And sure, there are, projecting an image through these pixels, right? But they're projecting through a black mirror this entire time. So my question is, what is the potential of something going on there without us even realizing it, that we're staring into these ancient divination devices?
That is, yep, that's something. That is something.
So think about that when you're doom scrolling.
Yeah, just turn off your screen and stare and see what you see. And it's probably going to be less scary than what you see on Twitter. Oh, boy.
Nice.
Well, I think that's actually a pretty great place to stop, unless you have anything else you wanted to talk about that we haven't covered.
I don't. I just am excited that we got a chance to talk about all this stuff. I feel like we did a pretty, a great precursory look at the implications of haunted objects and a little bit of the history and a little bit of things to be open to, but also maybe think a little harder about.
Yeah, I think that this was a great conversation, as it always is with you, and I just appreciate your point of view more than almost anyone's, just because I love talking about the paranormal, and I love allowing myself to kind of step into that for a little bit, because we don't know anything, and if anybody tells you they know, they don't know. Is that a cool PSA? But yeah, so thanks again so much for coming on the show, Jim, and we will have you back soon, I dream.
Thanks, Chelsey. Love you, bud.
Love you, man. This was American Hysteria. Make sure you listen to Euphomet, EUPHOMET, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more Haunted Doll content, head to our Patreon for a new episode of Hysteria Home Companion, where producer Miranda and I meet a succubus doll from eBay, learn the history of wax museums, and look at my favorite episode of My Strange Addiction, Addicted to Raggedy Ann and Andy. You'll also get early and ad-free episodes. That's patreon.com/American Hysteria. This episode has sound design by Clear Como Studios and was produced by Miranda Zickler. And as always, I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope this was a gentle come down for you from the holiest time of Halloween. Have a great week.